put it in a drum, and burned it before feeding to chickens. In April 2000, a shocking and disturbing incident unfolded in the mountains of Seto City, Aichi Prefecture, Japan. Today, we're going to delve into the chilling events leading up to this incident and the ensuing verdict that shook the nation. Yukinari Kawamura had been working as a truck driver for approximately 5 years. During this period, he had come into contact with 5 other men who would later become his accomplices. These men were Tetsuya Nomura, Akikazu Makita, Koki Sato, Hideki Shirasawa, and Koichi Ikeda. Except for Makita, the other 4 individuals appeared to be on the blacklist of consumer finance companies. Kawamura left a transportation company in February 1996 and held various jobs before starting a used car sales business around April 1999. During this time, Kawamura was approached by Makita with a discussion about whether there was any profitable work they could do. Upon receiving this proposal, Kawamura began to consider whether they could engage in a scam known as Tarakomi Sagi together. Tarakomi Sagi is a method of scam where individuals receive goods under the guise of a legitimate transaction and then evade payment. In his attempt to profit from this scheme, he approached the 5 individuals he had known from his truck driver days. Since all of them were facing financial difficulties, they quickly became interested in this money-making opportunity. Around early November 1999, the 6 of them gathered at the office of a used car dealership to begin planning their scam operation. Under the instructions of Kawamura and Nomura, the other 4 men started engaging in the scam activities. However, their initial attempts were not very successful. Growing frustrated with this situation, Nomura resorted to psychological pressure by forcing the 4 men to buy their life insurance. This was done to instill the belief that if they failed to produce results or resisted, they would be killed. A man named Shigeki Fukaya, who would later become a victim of the incident, was running a coffee shop and a money-lending business. However, his business ventures were not successful, and he eventually found himself burdened with debts amounting to millions of yen. In response to Fukaya's financial struggles, one of the creditors, for some reason, requested a lending company owned by Nomura's father to collect Fukaya's debt. As a result, Fukaya's debts ended up back at Nomura's place, around early December 1999. Since the planned scam was not going well at the time, Nomura decided to take on the debt collection task. From then on, the 6 of them divided tasks, including tailing Fukaya and gathering information about him. Nomura managed to arrange a meeting with Fukaya. On the day of the meeting, when Nomura and Kawamura confronted Fukaya and demanded repayment, things didn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. Fukaya refused to repay as instructed and confronted the 2 without showing any fear. Nomura was infuriated by Fukaya's defiance, but the issue was not resolved that day. It seems they left the office without collecting a single yen. As tensions continued to rise, Kawamura eventually began to tell his 4 subordinates the story. "I've killed a man like him before, during debt collection. I once killed him, cut their body into pieces with a chainsaw, put it in a drum, and burned it before feeding to chickens." Of course, this was a fabricated story, but he said it to appear more menacing. Afterward, the 6 of them continued to tail Fukaya and eventually discovered that he lived with his wife, Yoko, and his sister-in-law, Katsuko. Despite their tailing efforts, it did not lead to repayment. As frustration gradually built up, Nomura devised a plan. The plan involved abducting and holding Fukaya and his family hostage, with the intention of stealing their car and valuables. 4 of his subordinates, Makita, Sato, Shirasawa, and Ikeda, were selected as the ones to carry out this plan. Following Nomura's orders, they made preparations and, in the early hours of a day in March, around midnight, they moved to the vicinity of Fukaya's home, traveling in a single car. They had planned to ambush Fukaya and his family upon their return home, but they did not show up as expected. As they waited, the 4 men fell asleep in the car. During this time, Fukaya and his family did return home, and their plan for that day failed. However, it seems that their scam activities started succeeding later on, and Nomura gradually forgot about Fukaya's existence. Then, one day, Nomura received an angry phone call from his father. The call was a reprimand for the lack of progress in Fukaya's matter, and it left Nomura feeling like his reputation had been tarnished because of Fukaya. In retaliation, he began planning another robbery, this time considering Fukaya's murder as well. For this plan's execution, Nomura instructed Sato and Shirasawa to gather the necessary items for the crime. In response, the two of them purchased a chainsaw, a mortar, raincoats, athletic shoes, rubber gloves, 2 drums for burning, and a mixture of gasoline and oil. Having made their preparations, the 6 individuals discussed their attack strategy at the office and then set out towards Nagoya City around 8:30 p.m. on April 3rd. At that time, they divided into groups of 3 and rode in 2 separate cars. Nomura, Kawamura, and Ikeda were in the car driven by Ikeda, serving as the tailing team, waiting for the target to appear near the coffee shop owned by Fukaya. On the other hand, Sato and Shirasawa, riding in the car driven by Makita, positioned themselves on the street near Fukaya's home garage as the assault team. Sato and Shirasawa were armed with weapons for the assault, and Makita parked the car to block the garage entrance. Around midnight on April 4th, the car carrying the 3 targets arrived in front of their home. Fukaya noticed the presence of a car blocking his way. Unaware that 2 attackers were hiding nearby, he stepped out of his vehicle to investigate. At that moment, Shirasawa, armed with a wooden mortar, struck Fukaya from behind. Fukaya, taken by surprise by the sudden attack, attempted to flee and seek help. Following him, Yoko and Katsuko also rushed out of the car. However, the tailing team had also joined the scene by this point, resulting in a total of 6 assailants. Consequently, Yoko and Katsuko were quickly captured. Fukaya managed to escape successfully. The perpetrators lost sight of him and decided to focus on Yoko and Katsuko, who were the only remaining targets. They forced the 2 women back into their car and divided into 3 separate vehicles, which included the 2 cars they had driven to the scene as well as Fukaya's car. Nomura and Shirasawa left the scene separately from the rest of the group. They planned to regroup near Nagoya Dome and continue their actions. At this point, they realized that Fukaya's car was running low on gasoline. Shirasawa and Ikeda decided to stop at a gas station before reuniting with the other 4. The other 4 individuals left the scene in their 2 cars. Around this time, Fukaya, the only target who had managed to evade the perpetrators, had already contacted the police. As a result, an emergency response was already underway. Approximately 45 minutes after the crime, around 1:17 a.m., police officers involved in the investigation located Fukaya's car, being driven by Shirasawa and Ikeda. They were taken into Chikusa police station around 3 a.m., suspected of robbery causing injury. However, at this point, they concealed information about their accomplices and the murder plan. They claimed to have acted alone in the attack. On the other hand, the other 4 individuals, unaware of Shirasawa's arrest, waited at the pre-arranged meeting point for the 2 missing members, but there was no sign of them. Consequently, the ringleaders, Nomura and Kawamura, decided to proceed with their plan with the remaining 4 members. They began searching for a location to carry out the murder and simultaneously discuss the method. Ultimately, Nomura and Kawamura decided to burn the victims alive in a drum canister. About 2 hours after the initial incident, around 2:30 a.m., the 4 individuals found an open area in the mountains. Parking their car there, Nomura proceeded to rob Katsuko, forcibly taking approximately 24,000 yen in cash and 2 gift vouchers from her handbag. Concurrently, they taped the mouths of Yoko and Katsuko to prevent them from screaming. Following this, they placed 2 drum canisters from their car on the ground and made Yoko and Katsuko sit inside. They then poured gasoline mixed oil on them and sealed the lids of the drum canisters. After confirming that the lids were securely shut, Kawamura instructed Makita to ignite the containers. Makita used a lighter to set fire to a newspaper and used it to ignite the gasoline mixed oil inside the drum canisters. As a result, Yoko and Katsuko were burned to death. Subsequently, Nomura and Kawamura went to search for Shirasawa and Ikeda, who had not appeared at the meeting point. However, at this time, Shirasawa and the others had already been arrested. Therefore, there was no way for them to locate the 2 individuals, and they eventually returned to the murder scene around 5 a.m. During their absence, Makita and Seto had been following Nomura and Kawamura's instructions, burning the bodies and any potential evidence. Once the contents of the drum canisters had burned completely, they also abandoned the body with remaining by dropping it into the river. Around 7 a.m., Nomura and Kawamura returned to the office in a car driven by Seto. During the car ride, the three of them coordinated their alibis by discussing what to say. Furthermore, Seto headed to the newly established office to figure out how to dispose of the clothing he had worn during the crime. On the other hand, Makita, who had been driving a separate vehicle, headed directly to the office from the crime scene. However, around this time, the police had already identified the location of the group's office and had stationed officers in the vicinity. Unaware of this, Seto showed up at the office as planned. When he was spotted by the police, Seto was arrested around 1 p.m. on charges of robbery causing injury. Upon witnessing Seto being taken into custody, Makita made a call to Nomura and conveyed this information. Realizing that the police were closing in on them, Nomura and Kawamura immediately began their escape. During their escape, they reunited with Makita. From there, the three of them used various modes of transportation to head towards Tokyo. However, during their journey, they learned that Makita had been apprehended. The Aichi Prefecture Police Investigation Division had established a task force and initiated a full-scale investigation after Seto's arrest. The following day, they began a public search, deploying 80 personnel to track down Makita, who was designated as a wanted suspect. Simultaneously, Nomura and Kawamura, along with Makita, were devising a plan to evade charges. Their plan involved having Makita turn himself into the police, confessing that the four of them had committed the crime, and explaining that Yoko and Katsuko had been released near Nagoya Dome. They also considered implicating all four of them in the fraud case. While conveying this plan to Makita, Nomura and the others assured him that they would take care of his family, provided he never spoke about their involvement. Following these instructions, Makita decided to call the Aichi Prefecture police from his hiding place in a hotel and inform them of his location. Consequently, he was formally arrested around 6:06 p.m. on the same day. During subsequent interrogations, Makita initially did not provide the statements as instructed by the ringleaders. However, it became apparent that he was not able to maintain the fabricated story. Unable to withstand the pressure, Makita eventually revealed the existence of Nomura and Kawamura, who were still evading authorities, and confessed to the murders of the two missing individuals. Upon learning these facts, the police launched a nationwide manhunt for Nomura and Kawamura on April 6. Furthermore, the next day, they began searching the area near the murder scene and discovered some evidence believed to be part of the victim's remains. As of April 8, an extensive search had commenced in the mountains, leading to the discovery of various pieces of evidence. Despite continuing their escape during this time, the two fugitives eventually realized that they could no longer evade capture once they became aware of their own wanted status. Consequently, they decided to surrender themselves to the police and persistently assert that they were not involved in the crimes. On April 10, they turned themselves in at the Chikusa police station in Aichi Prefecture. Thus, all 6 members of the criminal group were arrested. At this time, apart from Kawamura, 5 of the individuals had largely admitted to their involvement in the crime. Kawamura, who had initially denied the charges, soon changed his stance and began to acknowledge his involvement. In this manner, all the perpetrators eventually admitted to their own roles in the crimes. Makita and Seto, who were involved in the murders, received life sentences, while Shirasawa and Ikeda, who were arrested after the attack, were sentenced to 12 years in prison each. Later, the sentencing trial for the 2 ringleaders took place, and both of them were sentenced to death. Regarding Nomura and Kawamura, who were sentenced to death, their sentences were carried out approximately 2 years and 6 months later, at the Nagoya Detention Center. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of a chilling chapter in Japan's crime history. Please like and subscribe for more riveting stories and true crime content.